A man is walking down the stairs, heading toward the inner part of the temple, and he soon comes face to face with a massive creature with large horns protruding from its head. The beast starts roaring furiously as if ready to attack the intruder. From a distance, large magical circles can be seen seemingly emerging from where they were standing. The young man appears deeply pensive, as if mourning something that had happened in his life. He kneels down to touch the ground with his hands and use his power. A cold blue energy begins to circulate around his body. That chill was enough to freeze the entire earth, wrapping it up effortlessly as if Lullen is asleep. Once his power fully manifests, a massive female figure appears behind him. Gradually, that place begins to be covered in ice, and the creature that was once aggressive now seems very uneasy with the change in temperature. That woman gently blows toward it, and the creature is frozen in a large block of ice. Just as the conflict began, it was brought to an end. The young man looks at the bright sky. All the icy energy he summons slowly fades away. His gaze is full of determination because his task is not yet over. The Shin family is among the most powerful in Korea when it comes to magic, and even among them, the protagonist is exceptionally gifted, at least until the day of the accident. Hevel's father asks if he understood everything he heard. The young man confirms that he did, stating he is the third son of this prestigious family, saying he will bring results worthy of his family's reputation as he plans to graduate at the top of his class and become the greatest mage in the world. The patriarch acknowledges that the boy possesses a potential unmatched by anyone else. He's far superior to his own brothers, and he's looking forward to seeing the results, hoping his son will become the pinnacle of magic itself. That's exactly what the boy intends to do. Determined to prove to his father that he won't fail under any circumstance, the patriarch of the family is currently the most powerful mage in the nation. Since that conversation 2 years ago, time has passed, and he is now attending the Obelisk Academy. A professor asks the sophomores to gather with the others because today there will be a practical exam. He tells Sekiev to get ready since he'll be going first and says there's no need to be nervous, but the boy arrogantly replies that he has no reason to feel that way since the lower half of the class had already been decided. Among them is the protagonist, a loser who can't even use basic magic, and the arrogant student doesn't know how he even made it to the second year, claiming he's a useless piece of trash who can't do the simplest things. In today's world, mages are not only rare, but also incredibly valuable. The practical exam begins and digital beasts automatically materialize in front of the arrogant student. He attacks them using fire magic, proving extremely effective. Since he completed the exam within the time limit, he passes, but still takes the opportunity to say it was easier than expected. With artificial intelligence, magic has become easier. Every mage has chips implanted in their bodies that assist with casting, but our protagonist isn't compatible with this. It's now his turn to be examined. The beasts have already materialized, and the boy begins to gather mana in his hands. This is the fundamental source of magic. It must be channeled through the heart and then processed through the 8 steps of the magical formula. But as it takes time to complete this lengthy process, the creatures begin to attack. Watching the test are his classmates, including the arrogant student who is relishing the moment of failure. Hale is worried about the exam but also irritated by the comments as he's a mage considered obsolete in modern times. Unfortunately, he doesn't complete the exam within the required time and fails to earn a passing grade. With no shame at all, his classmates begin laughing at his failure, while the boy deeply limits being unable to succeed. But not everything is bad compared to his previous performance. He managed to increase his invocation speed. As soon as they learned he couldn't use artificial intelligence, his father gave up all expectations, even giving him medicine to destroy his mana circle. But the boy refuses to give up on his dreams. Being outdated, he can only learn through ancient books. Given the massive amount of material he owns, he really wishes he could read it all on a screen since he no longer has space to store everything. While lost in thought, he comes across a peculiar book, one he has no memory of ever purchasing. He decided to pick it up with his hands to examine its contents. The book is quite old, but it's strangely well adorned. In fact, it looks like something very expensive. Trying to understand its words, he has no idea what it could be because the handwriting is terrible until he comes across a very well-known name, Baitneo. This person was the first great mage of humanity and the first emperor of his kingdom. He is considered the creator of all magic. When our protagonist was just a child, he used to read many books that told pieces of this man's biography. While immersed in his memories, the book began to glow subtly, still in his hands, until the glowing energy grew so strong he had to squint his eyes. Dropping the book to the floor, he started wondering what that was, and to his surprise, the book didn't even fall. The light kept getting stronger, making the boy even more intrigued. A voice began to emerge from those pages, speaking to the one who shares the same constitution and is able to hear it. Badionio himself was leaving this book for him. Realizing what was happening, the boy began to wonder about the identity of that voice. Once again, he is taken by his memories. Back then, he still didn't know that for being a displaced one, he would receive the greatest of gifts. The teacher said that the students who failed the test that day would need extra classes. Some began to wonder if anyone had actually failed until they pointed at our protagonist. He was unable to use I. He endured all that without any power, never imagining he could one day be revived. After that experience, a new day dawned and the students were at the cafeteria having breakfast. Sitting at one of the tables is our protagonist, and no one is with him until a boy approached him, asking if he was going to eat alone again. Accepting the presence of this other person, he was surprised that he came too. The boy with tied-up hairs said the protagonist's food looked really good. His name is Shin, and the first impression he gives might be of someone a little stupid. But he's one of the top 10 talents of that academy and became a third circle mage at the age of 18. In truth, he's very skilled. Now the two of them are at the same table having a meal, and the goofy boy is taking what the protagonist didn't eat onto his own plate. Within that academy, he's the only one the protagonist can call a friend. Shin told his friend that if he was having any problems, he just needed to say the word, and it would be solved immediately. He said everything was fine. There was no need for that kind of thing. But he mentioned finding a really strange book the day before. A very strange book, and everything past page 3 was completely blank. The book said something about Badionio. But since there was nothing written beyond that, he thought maybe one of the other students had done something to it. Yet, he heard a voice coming from its pages. The word said Badionio was leaving his magic to the one who would succeed him or something like that, and that anyone without the same constitution wouldn't even be able to open it. Shin found that very curious and asked if he could try opening it too. But the protagonist hadn't finished sharing his information. There was something written on the last page. It said one had to die first, and after that morbid news, his friend grew concerned. The words continued, it wasn't about the heart, but rather, it was necessary to create a mana circle in one's own brain. Shin immediately realized this could be fatal and suggested they inspect the book before doing anything else. Night fell over the academy, and now the two were inside the protagonist's dorm. His friend would try to open the book. With it in his hands, he tried to force the pages open with all his strength. After giving up, he realized it wouldn't be possible to open it. There was likely some kind of magic preventing it. Since he was no longer interested in that, he said goodbye to the protagonist, wishing him a good night. The door quickly closed, and the boy was completely alone. The book was already open in his hands, and he was contemplating some of its notes. After witnessing his friend's effort, he became even more intrigued that he could open the book so easily. Some symbols began to appear before his eyes. He noticed those pages had been blank. Once again, the voice returned speaking directly to his successor. If hypothesis was correct, it said he was very likely using a mana circle in the heart to invoke magic. For normal people, that must be the way, but for people like them, that wasn't the right method. As soon as he finished absorbing the information, the book glowed and levitated once more. If he were willing to accept its will and ready to become a disciple, he needed to destroy the mana circle in his heart and recreate a mana circle inside his brain. After doing that, he would have to open the book again to receive more instructions. Our protagonist started thinking this was a cruel joke as he was being led to perform an act of madness. The source of all magic is extremely toxic to the brain since mana can cause the mind to collapse, possibly resulting in brain death. In other words, if he tried to do that, he would almost certainly suffer an agonizing death. Turning his back on the scriptures, he said no one would be insane enough to go through with it, leaving the book abandoned and lying on the floor of his room. At dawn the next day, a professor asked the protagonist what was going on with him. The young man had brought that mysterious book to the professor so it could be examined. Inspecting the cover, he noticed it was written in an ancient language. At first glance, it appeared to be quite old. Wanting to know what exactly he should examine, the boy asked the professor to try opening it and to confirm whether it was being magically sealed, noting that there had been a strange atmosphere among the students lately. The professor advised him to pay more attention to his studies rather than rumors, but for now, he needed to concentrate. He was carefully examining the book, looking for any signs of magic. Returning the book, he said there was no magic present at all, and once again urged the boy to focus more on his studies. Our protagonist became even more thoughtful. His friend couldn't open the book, and after being examined by a professor, nothing was found. But that didn't frighten him. In fact, it made him consider the possibility that the book might actually be real. Once again in his room, he is examining that mysterious book. In one of his hands are the pills given to him by his father, capable of destroying his mana circle. The advice he received from the patriarch was to forget about magic and focus on theory. But this leap of faith he's about to take isn't to give up, it's to go even further. Even so, swallowing those pills is terrifying as he doesn't know if the book is telling the truth. Since he has few options to reach his dreams, he decides to take the pills anyway, because that day he was going to die. After swallowing the pills, he begins to feel pain all over his body, and he can feel the mana circle in his heart being completely destroyed. That pain signifies the death of a mage. From this point forward, what he's about to do is completely forbidden, attempting to establish a mana circle inside his brain. Now he was living again as a mage. As the magic starts to circulate through his head, the pain begins to fade. It was so intense that the boy thought he was going to die. And for a moment, he truly believed he would die until he heard a whisper from someone else. It felt like hands were reaching toward his ears. The voice asked if future generations could hear it, and our protagonist realized it was the same voice from the book. He could feel the change happening in his body, as if the spirits responsible for mana were dancing and coexisting. He could sense everything those voices were doing. They were smiling and singing, as if he were being blessed. Only then did he open his eyes, realizing he had fallen to the ground. Immediately, the boy stood up in shock, trying to understand if he was truly alive until he looked at the book beside him, which had decided to open by itself. Examining its contents, he noticed once again that some of the pages that had been blank were now filled with writing, and the voice coming from it was getting clearer and clearer. It congratulated the boy for taking his first steps. Only then did the voice reveal the name of the book. It was called Eid Red. From this point forward, the legend of our protagonist would begin through that book. The mysterious voice said it would leave all of its magic to our protagonist, for those who came seeking its knowledge. From now on, the boy would be its disciple. Those words fill the protagonist with joy. Since that mysterious event, a few days have passed. Classes proceeded normally within the academy. But the boy was completely immersed in that mysterious book as new notes continued to appear. He never imagined that learning magic could be so fun. Eider is filled with diverse knowledge. There he learned that mana has its own ill will, and for most people, when it comes into contact with the brain, that will clashes with their own, leading to madness. But the boy is different. His willpower is strong enough to suppress the will of mana, preventing his mind from collapsing. Now he understands why he can't work with AI, as his brain blocks the chip's interference. While he was deeply absorbed in his reading, the teacher called everyone's attention. Soon, there would be an exam for the second-year students, but this time, a new rule would be introduced. Faced with this news, everyone began to listen very carefully. It was about the students who are not able to meet the minimum standard. They will be expelled from the academy. This was personally proposed by the head of the Shin family. Upon hearing that, our protagonist grew more serious, and the class jerk felt relieved. It was about time they got rid of the useless ones. The teacher didn't even bother hiding the fact that he was also pleased with it. Meanwhile, the protagonist grew more and more pensive, thinking about his father's intentions. Outside, under the twilight glow, the students were heading back home. The boy knew that renting simulation stations for training was very expensive. That place he had visited cost 200,000 per hour, and in his current situation that was too much. Even so, he decided to go in, being greeted by the receptionist. The boy said he would hire 1 hour, and the receptionist asked if he was going in alone. After confirming that, the receptionist gave him a card and asked the boy to go to room 14. He would receive all the instructions there. But the boy was already familiar with it and knew how to use the system. The receptionist knew he was from the Shin family, but could only feel sorry for him, knowing the boy was incompatible with AI. Inside the training room, the simulation would begin, and the wolf challenge was about to start. Several creatures materialized around our protagonist. Even though none of them were real, their fury was highly convincing. They were low-tier monsters, and dealing with 10 of them at once wouldn't be easy. The Academy's average time for this was 12 minutes and 33 seconds. But ever since he changed his mana circle, the boy had been training daily according to the instructions in that book. There was no better way to test his progress and what his new mana circle was capable of. Wasting no time, he summoned an infinite circle that surrounded his body. The digitalized creatures, which from now on will be called Digimonts, began to attack. But the boy managed to summon a water barrier to protect himself. Observing his speed and power, he realized that was truly incredible, almost unbelievable. Ordinary mages use a mana circle in their hearts to be compatible with AI. But now, the protagonist could use his whole body for that function, channeling through his brain, and his dormant magical potential had finally been released. He could cast magical circles at incredible speed. Then the voice told him not to be impressed by such small things. He still had a long road of training ahead. The infinite circle was just the foundation of Bait Neo's magic style. He must control the magic through the images form in his mind. These were the instructions from the first book of Bait Neo's magic style, The Intention of the Heart. It didn't take long for the reserved hour to end. As he left the facility, the receptionist thanked him and asked him to visit again, heading to room 14 to clean it. The staff member just wanted to go home. But he was curious to know how that renegade genius trained until he stumbled upon some very intriguing information. He had defeated the Digimonts in under 7 minutes, a time that matches world-class competition levels. He thought it could only be a fraud. Maybe a device was broken, and that's why he felt that kick was deserved. Heading toward his dorm, our protagonist was growing more and more confident. This was the beginning of his own legend. To form his first circle, Seaman, the process was very demanding. The notes in the book were completely different from everything he had learned so far. It said that mana is your arms and legs, your heart and mind, and should move as you will it. But it was hard to find any clarity in such vague words. It felt like trying to grasp something that doesn't exist. Mages call this the barrier of enlightenment when they encounter the limits of their own magic, something common in all eras. Because of this, he decided to focus on mana circulation throughout his body, just as written in the book. While dedicating himself fervently, he also wondered if this would be enough. He'd already been doing this exercise for 10 hours. Normally, he would have lost consciousness by now due to exhaustion, but that still hadn't happened. The next day, he headed to the academy as usual, and on the way, he ran into his friend who greeted him. Seeing the exhausted expression on the protagonist's face, he asked if everything was all right with him. For the boy, focusing on mana circulation is no easy task. He needs to quickly get used to this new mana circle. At the age of 12, he reached the second circle and was immediately recognized as a prodigy. And now, all he can manage is a single circle in his head, and he's thinking of ways to progress. Breaking through the barrier of enlightenment is essential for that. At least, that's what he used to hear from his father back when he still had expectations for him. Perfection is nothing more than a shackle, a lie born for human arrogance. But now, Lo's words hold an entirely different meaning for him. Meditating once again, he was able to feel things differently. His focus was entirely directed inward on his body. Then he began to feel the energy flowing through his hands and feet while thinking that his heart and mind should move as he wills. A free imagination is fundamental for casting spells without a chant. This is how the chip makes life easier for mages. It's a very solid technique. The boy now tries to use his thoughts freely, able to create objects that can freely change shape, ignoring the structure of traditional forms. In this way, he was able to conjure several firebirds flying around him. Since he only has one circle form, that experience is extremely draining, but the result is impressive. He's already breaking through the enlightenment barrier, reaching even greater heights. One of the professors came to the room where the protagonist was, informing him that Hale had visitors. He found it strange that someone had come all the way there to visit him. With both of them walking down the corridor toward the meeting room, the professor said it was the boy's father. Was already waiting for his son in the visitor's room and asked him to come in. The professor informed him that he had brought the boy. Then the patriarch turned around to examine him. It had been some time since they had last seen each other. Knowing that this was a private conversation, the professor said he would excuse himself, leaving the two alone. Once seated, the patriarch began to talk about his son's attendance at school. It seemed he hadn't taken the medicine he had been given, and only then did the boy say that some things had happened. He had now made significant progress in his magical abilities. That left the patriarch disheartened, realizing that his son was still chasing a hopeless dream. And the protagonist said he was determined to become the greatest mage of the current era. Those words sounded far too arrogant to the patriarch, who looked at his son firmly. But there wasn't the slightest hesitation in the boy. With a deep sigh, he said his son had already wasted an entire year, and it's time for him to face reality. No matter how hard he works or even what he may achieve in the future, if he's not compatible with AI, there's no way he'll become a decent mage. Still, he does have a unique talent. He could dedicate himself to theory, and even someone as out of place as him could make use of that talent. The boy ignored everything he had just heard and said once again that he would not give up on magic because he doesn't want to live an ordinary life like everyone else. He doesn't want to rely on his family's name or his father's influence either. His goals are even greater. He wants to become the next head of the Mage family. That only made the patriarchs even more silent until he said that becoming a great mage or the head of a family is not something achieved through ambition alone. And with a confident smile on his face, the boy said he would prove his point. This only made his father more skeptical as he knew his son was on the verge of being expelled from the academy. But the boy declared that he would place among the top 10 students in the next exam. And if he failed, he would leave the academy to become a theoretical mage as his father advised. However, if he succeeded, his father would have to recognize him and promise to give him all the necessary support in the future. That only made the old man more worried, thinking that his son's latest achievement had been developing an unjustified sense of confidence. There was nothing left to be said, and he began to walk out of the room, telling his son that he hopes this won't be an accomplishment without meaning. Leading the boy deep in thought, even though he was more confident than ever. A few more days had passed, and classes continued as usual. The professor was about to announce what type of evaluation the students would face. Some students start chatting. Apparently, it's going to be a duel between classmates. The test will be a single elimination tournament among the students. It will begin in 3 days. And as expected in any story where the protagonist has sudden development, there will be an audience during this test, which made the jerk very happy since he still doesn't know he's just his side character. The teacher wished the students would do their best, and our protagonist knows that his time to shine has arrived. The news quickly spreads among the students as even members of the Magic Tower are coming to witness the duels. Our protagonist knows this will generate a huge impact. The presence of the Magic Tower also draws the media. It's an organization formed by the 12 greatest mages in the world, wielding the power of a nation. The dream of every young mage is to join it someday. That's when the jerk character approached him. He seemed curious about the protagonist's condition and asked how he'd been doing. The boy said nothing, merely hiding his frustration. The jerk's name is Siyuk, a very wealthy and also very talented student. And by the magical powers of plot force, the protagonist and the jerk will face off during the exam. Trying to intimidate our protagonist, the jerk said he was totally screwed and that he would finally get his revenge for what happened 5 years ago. A flashback takes us to that moment. It was the final tournament in the junior category. That jerk had lost miserably to our protagonist. When he found out the protagonist was a displaced one, he started taking advantage of that, saying he would soon be expelled. Now the jerk was thrilled because he would have the chance to beat the protagonist up right before his expulsion. He'd make sure to hit him so hard he'd go home crying. But the protagonist was confident with the smile of someone who's armed with a Glock. He said he wouldn't be the one going home in tears. Even if he acts like a jerk, the guy has zero resistance to provocation. It didn't take long for their argument to draw the attention of other students. Kajirk said the protagonist must be completely insane, probably suffering from some kind of insurmountable mental challenge. He claimed he didn't understand the situation and would get beaten so badly he'd have to crap upside down. But the protagonist wasn't affected by any of those words. Then he remembered 5 years ago the jerk was acting the same way and, in the end, lost miserably. Apparently, time had passed for both of them, but the jerk hadn't improved his skills at all. Since his tolerance for insults is non-existent, the jerk started getting really pissed, wanting to hit his rival right then and there. Even more sly, the protagonist apologized for making him feel bad while calling him a coward. This pushed the jerk to the brink of sanity. He then grabbed our protagonist by the collar, calling him a big dummy and saying he was ugly. But our protagonist was even sharper. He said that in order to fall, you have to climb something first, something the jerk had never done in his life. Besides, a genius, always a genius. That's the truth that separates them, and he would make sure to teach that lesson well during their duel. Finishing his words, the protagonist walked away as if nothing had happened. But the jerk was losing control, biting his nails non-stop from having his ego shattered. Now he wants to incinerate the boy down to the bone. News about Hale began to spread. The return of the genius, the fallen prodigy, the dark horse. That's what they were calling him. Reading the news, the boy also noticed that they were talking about his rival, since he too came from a wealthy family. Knowing the jerk's personality, it was expected that he would do something about it. Many people are eagerly awaiting the prodigy's return during that exam. But for him, that's not a bad thing. He truly wants to be noticed by his peers. While lost in his daydreams of victory, his phone started ringing. Answering, he began talking to his father and said he had read the news of the day. He told the old man not to worry about anything. There was a new lion on that mountain now. But his father already knew the son he had. He asked if it was him who had caused all that mess. The boy confirmed he provoked the jerk just to gain more attention in the media. That made the patriarch regret what they had discussed. They didn't go forward with that challenge because they trusted their son, but because they believed there would be no defeat tied to the family name. Even with the boy's determination, the father doesn't believe his son will win, and now the family's reputation might be stained. The boy said that the public already believes he was disowned, so the damage to the family's name would be minimized. But that's not enough for his father, who remains disappointed. Because wherever his son goes, the family name will follow, and the boy is well aware of that. But thinking about potential gains, he believes the risk is worth it. Hearing this, the old man started wondering if his son was smoking crack. Because he has no idea what benefits they would gain if his son actually won, and the boy said that he himself is the benefit. Since he's going to become a more powerful mage, one of the strongest in history, the old man thinks these are just youthful delusions, as if his son is already stronger than the tower mages. With no hope of bringing reason to the boy's head, he said he would leave him be. With one condition: if he brought disgrace to the family, he should be prepared for the consequences. And that's how their cold interaction came to an end. But the protagonist is more confident than ever because the stage for his performance had been set. Finally, the day of the evaluation had arrived. Many people are present in the audience, including journalists and photographers. Our protagonist is one of the more well-known participants due to his family name. The jerk asked him if he liked the article since the prodigy has always been popular, and he can't wait to expose him in front of everyone because there won't be time for him to cast any spell. Smiling casually, the protagonist said he wouldn't be the one losing that duel, and he's very grateful that the jerk unknowingly helped execute his plan. Even after being provoked by the jerk, he said he doesn't care one bit since the guy is just a nobody, and warned that he'd end the fight quickly. That filled the jerk with rage. He figured his opponent had completely lost his mind until the protagonist raised a single finger, saying he would win the match for the first circle spell. The Obelisk Academy arena is packed. Everyone heard the promise made by the prodigy. In front of all those people, the jerk could only do one thing: get extremely pissed off. He can't stand being disrespected by trash like that. Little does he know, he'll be spending a lot on therapy very soon. That would be the first duel, and the referee gave the signal for them to begin. In front of all those eyes, our slightly narcissistic protagonist was eager to start shining. The first move came from his opponent. It didn't take long for his eyes to grasp what was happening. The fireball that had been conjured didn't even hit the protagonist. His desire to crush the protagonist is so intense that the chip implanted in his neck was overheating, clearly not intel. Must be Ryzen. This time he was going to use a third circle spell, Explosion, something our protagonists have been eagerly waiting for. The catastrophic effect of the spell spreads throughout the arena. Inside the cloud of dust, no one knows what happened. The jerk started bragging, convinced that the outcome was inevitable. But his smug monologue was immediately cut short. The victory hadn't come. Before him stood his opponent with intact clothes and no injuries on his body. Fueled by rage, he tried to use an even more powerful spell to win, sending several fireballs toward our protagonist. Completely unfazed, he began to gather a bit of water in the palm of his hand, creating a barrier that protected him from the fire attack. Even seeing all of this, the little jerk couldn't accept that his attacks were ineffective. Moreover, all of them had been blocked with great ease by his opponent. Someone mysterious was observing all of this, coming to the conclusion that it was indeed quite strange. Because that young man was casting first circle spells without any kind of incantation, his secretary asked why he had rearranged his schedule just to witness a student duel. She asked if he knew anything about Hale's magic, and the man replied no. All he knew was what he had read in the newspaper about the return of a prodigy. He came purely out of curiosity. but his secretary refused to believe in such a coincidence. If word got out that the head of the Blue Magic Tower, an 8th Circle Mage, had come just to watch this duel, it would cause a huge uproar. Trying to excuse himself to his secretary, Kim said he was well aware of that. That's why he was in the room reserved for important people. As you watched the match, another person entered the room. Kim greeted him politely, though he hadn't expected that person to be here too. Inside the arena, our protagonist appears to be quite calm. The same cannot be said for the jerk, whose most powerful magic was blocked by a first circle technique. He tries to replay the image in his mind to understand what just happened. His opponent's casting speed is abnormally high. Knowing exactly what he must be thinking, the protagonist asked if the jerk was feeling curious. But the boy, clearly upset and with the wounded ego, told him to shut up, telling him to just die after the next attack. Completely oblivious to the reality playing out before his eyes, the jerk used the same attack again. A massive explosion occurred upon impact. Using the same approach and doing the same thing, he hoped to achieve a different result, only to be brutally struck by reality, seeing that his opponent remained standing. But the protagonist's patience was also wearing thin. Now it was his turn to take the offensive. He forced the jerk to dodge a wind spear that nearly grazed his head. That was concerning. The strike came so close the jerk almost lost his hair. And not only had he failed to do any damage, he hadn't even noticed his opponent had switched elements. So he went back to stroking his own ego, saying he wouldn't lose to first circle spells. But our protagonist disagreed. He would lose and it would be humiliating. He hurled another wind spear at him. But this time, the boy had to summon a magical shield. Noticing his defense had worked, a flash of hope lit up in his eyes. And he started mocking our protagonist, saying he shouldn't feel so confident just because he increased his casting speed. Unfortunately, his speech wasn't finished. Wind spears were already flying through the air. This time, the jerk was struck in the arm, and he had no idea how the protagonist managed to cast his spears that quickly. Now he wanted to know what mysterious technique his opponent was using. The others watching the battle also wanted that answer. Creating a small sphere of wind in one hand, our protagonist said the jerk must be immune to knowledge because his stupidity was genuinely terrifying. So if you show him how it's done, the wind sphere transformed into a small bird, which rushed swiftly toward the jerk. He couldn't tell what kind of thing that was, and if it was a wind spirit, shouldn't have a double hit ability. But our protagonist confirmed that's exactly what it had. Because he was capable of shaping things that way, it was up to the jerk to defend himself, as now there were 4 of them, and the birds soared cheerfully toward their target. The poor jerk thought summoning a shield would be enough, only to be shocked by the force with which he was being hit. He believed that if he could just block those attacks, he might still come out victorious, only to feel a sharp sting right in his back. One of those spears had taken a different path, bypassing the shield. Our protagonist didn't stop mocking him, saying the jerk looked like a drug addict in withdrawal, and that his beating session had only just begun. More wind birds were summoned, and the jerk had to move to dodge them. Keeping his distance was his only option. Magical power is limited to a certain range. If he stayed far enough away, he figured he wouldn't be hit by any of those attacks. Our protagonist said the decision he had made was actually quite good. And because of that, it was time to change tactics, so he brought his hands together. Strong winds began forming inside the arena, frightening the jerk. Soon, everyone would smell what was coming from his underwear, the first item to be obliterated in this fight. An even bigger wind burr had been formed, something much more powerful. The leader of the Blue Tower was impressed. The prodigy wasn't just casting quickly. He was also altering the trajectory of the spells mid-air, something truly exceptional. Only then was the identity of the mysterious figure in the rune revealed. It was our protagonist's father and the current head of the Shin family, an 8th Circle Mage. The secretary confirmed that the prodigy's magic wasn't obeying the rules they were subject to, the open code system. Open code magic follows certain criteria. The reverse slash, for instance, has a maximum range of 38 meters, and its trajectory can only be altered once. In other words, open code magic only works according to preset parameters. Nowadays, mage duels resemble a mental game where each side tries to predict the opponent's moves. But our protagonist is on another level. He ignores all the limitations of modernity, and his great wind spear struck a target in a devastating manner. The impact had shattered the arena floor, and the jerk couldn't believe how much trouble he was having. The protagonist to hit his opponent was underestimating the capabilities of single circle spells. If he ends up exhausted from using his most powerful spells, then even a pen is enough to take someone's life. But he didn't expect a lecture in the middle of the fight, and the jerk was completely confused. Materializing a bit of water in his hands, the protagonist demonstrated a single circle spell. He said the principle of the pen also applies to magic. Something complex isn't required to end a life. With that, the jerk's head was engulfed by a ball of water, cutting off his ability to breathe. Students' bodies are protected by their uniforms, which generate a magical barrier around them. Unfortunately, it seems that material wasn't enough to prevent the jerk's suffering. He was already collapsed on the ground in total despair, unable to breathe. Faced with imminent victory, the entire arena fell silent. There was nothing more our protagonist needed to do to secure his win. Looking at the match referee, he said the outcome was already very clear. Asking if he should continue his attacks, the referee declared the fight over, announcing to everyone who the winner was, Shin. The poor jerk had been carried out as he didn't even have the strength to walk. Our protagonist walked out calmly, knowing he had achieved his goals. Looking at his hand, he realized it had been a long time since he felt this, the thrill of winning a competition, which is incredibly satisfying. Now he had become the mage he once was. The head of the Blue Tower was walking through the corridors, thinking about what he had just witnessed. That really was the return of a great prodigy. With intrigued eyes, he found the event very interesting, and now he wants to learn more about that young boy. The protagonist's best friend immediately ran to him, having heard that his friend had won the match. He was eager to know what kind of training he had done. He was extremely impressed with the movement of the wind spears and how they combined together. Only then did the protagonist ask if his friend wanted to know the details, and he cheerfully replied, yes. Leaning him close to his ear, he said he would reveal the truth. It was still a secret to everyone else. With his phone in hand, he asked if Chuno was watching too. The interview he had given right after the match had already been published. Everyone wanted to know what that automatic summoning was that he had shown. Since they want a plausible explanation for what their eyes had witnessed, they also wanted to know how he changed the trajectory of the spears. The head of the Blue Tower approached the boy and said he had the answer to those questions. Seeing that man, the protagonist was immediately surprised. He hadn't expected to see the Ice Demon King there. Kim said he had watched the match and was very intrigued, believing that the boy must have used a fourth circle spell, memorization. To explain his reasoning, he began to summon flames with one of his hands. The reporters were instantly captivated by it. Kim explained that memorization allows a spell to be prepared for instant casting. The reporters wanted to know why that isn't used more often. Kim said memorization only works with spells 3 levels lower. Asking the protagonist if he was correct, the boy replied that he was spot on. He hadn't known how to explain the technique he had learned, but that explanation was absolutely perfect. One of the reporters asked if the boy was really in the 4th circle of magic. Kim kept answering on his behalf, confidently asserting that the prodigy was indeed at the 4th level. The reporters didn't stop taking pictures and asking questions to all of them. Being at the 4th level at the protagonist's age is a major achievement, and with Kim's endorsement, few dared to doubt it. His best friend asked if it was really true and also had a few more questions now. One of the reporters wanted to know how he had managed to ignore the rules of open source magic. Kim was already working hard to provide plausible answers, but the boy took over, saying that ignoring the rules of open source magic was surprisingly simple. He just had to alter the spell's formula, leaving Kim quite impressed because it's supposedly impossible to alter a spell's formula. In other words, doing so is like putting wings on a car and expecting it to fly. Make it possible, but it's definitely not easy. Then he started to think that if the boy were compatible with Iad, he could have an impressive future ahead. At that moment, the protagonist was deeply distracted, explaining to reporters how his magic worked. The spells whose Kobe he modified were named Modified Magic. Kim was also observing what the boy was doing, becoming even more interested in him, because that was undeniably revolutionary in the world of magic. Its very foundations have been shaken. That was exactly what the article was about. But the protagonist's best friend didn't buy into that narrative and wondered whether he should really believe what he had heard. He was struggling to accept the truth. He couldn't hide his joy. He was happy his friend had come out victorious. Now that they had spoken, he was going back to his dormitory. He needed to take care of his physical condition, as the opponent he faced the next day was a challenging one. Wondering who that person could be, the protagonist got lost in his thoughts. Once again, the duels resumed in the academy's arena. While being watched by the crowd, the protagonist's friends seemed to be having trouble. His opponent turned out to be formidable. Seated in the audience, our protagonist identified who his friend's opponent was. It was that typical blonde and talented girl who appears in every story. Her name was Adella, and at the moment, she was casting another spell. She was a prodigy of her family representing two nations, France and Korea. At least they came up with an explanation for the blonde hair and blue eyes. Her magic was truly unique, and there was a reason for it. Lunar elemental magic, a secret technique of the girl's family. Our protagonist's friend was going through a rough time, and the blonde didn't wait long before attacking him again, causing the boy to fall to the ground. After a brief show of strength, the match was over. The girl was declared the winner of the fight. Our protagonist watched all of it with great attention. His eyes remained focused the entire time. That secret technique used both light and darkness. It wasn't registered in open code magic, so its range and power were unknown. Definitely, fighting her wouldn't be easy. That's when the boy started to feel like he was being watched. The blonde girl was staring straight at him. Our protagonist began to wonder if that was really happening. Later, he went to meet his friend, who was frustrated about the loss. Still, the protagonist congratulated him for his effort, but words couldn't cheer him up. He hadn't expected to face one of the toughest opponents right in the first round. Shaking off his sadness, he asked if the protagonist had won his second match, and he replied that he had. So now they knew who he'd be facing next. But their conversation was interrupted by the French girl, who also came to congratulate the protagonist's friend. He was very thankful for her words, but the girl was clearly focused on something else. Our protagonist still felt like he was being watched. She knew the boy was returning to the true path a mage should walk, one that must never be abandoned. As they talked, she decided to reveal the reason she enrolled in the academy, and she hoped the protagonist could help her with it. Our protagonist and the girl had known each other long before they entered that academy. Their families had a good relationship, which is why they had met several times, and the relationship between them was one of rivalry. The girl had left her studies in France just to surpass her small rival. However, everything changed when he revealed he was completely incompatible with AI, and ever since, they hadn't spoken again. That had been a major blow for her, as she would no longer be able to surpass the rival she had known her whole life. In a friendly tone, he said it was no longer worth it for her to see him as a goal to be overcome. Adella ignored those words and said they would confirm that only after they fought. The protagonist's friend became very worried as he didn't know if the boy was ready for that. Given his carefree response, the boy grew even more concerned for our protagonist because he wasn't aware of the rumors. That girl would be his next opponent in the competition. As soon as he found that out, our protagonist became a little concerned because that wasn't something he had been expecting. Finally, another day of competition at the academy. The girl seemed extremely determined, ready to surpass her rival once and for all. Hale hadn't yet arrived at the arena, and some jealous students in the audience began saying he must have fled since he was scared to death. They said he was all talk, and when he realized he couldn't win, he decided to drop out of the competition. Indeed, his delay was already getting unreasonable, and the referee went to the arena to give his verdict. Adella had won due to the absence of her opponent. That was when the boys suddenly appeared, shouting and clearly anxious, apologizing for taking so long. The referee was visibly upset and asked why the boy had taken so long to get there. He said he would hear the explanation later, but there would be no time for him to rest. That would be his penalty for arriving late. The referee ordered the competitors to take their positions. Adella wanted to know why her rival had taken so long to arrive. Hale told her it was nothing serious. He had just been making a few preparations for the battle. Adella seemed intrigued by that answer. Recognizing her opponent's strength, our protagonist confirmed that to defeat her, some extra preparation was necessary. But that didn't convince the girl, who didn't believe he could have prepared that much in just one day. Even so, she could sense that the rival standing in front of her was no longer the same as the day before. He had changed. Maybe now she could finally witness the true power he possessed. Havel said he had a good piece of advice for her. She should go all out from the very start if she wanted any chance at winning. She seemed to take the advice, forming an energy sphere in her hands. Pointing her fingers at him, she began preparing to fire a blast of flames. The fire was materializing at her fingertips like the barrel of a gun. Through other magical circles, she managed to multiply the spell. On the verge of being hit by those fireballs, our protagonist prepared a wind barrier which successfully kept him from being hit by the attack. Using earth magic, Adella then managed to materialize a large needle. Right after that, several cracks started to appear in the arena floor. They were advancing toward the protagonist, and he was nearly hit by an explosion that erupted from the ground. To avoid being struck, he had to leap into the air. Adella saw it as a huge opportunity as he wouldn't be able to dodge while airborne. She needed to make the most of this opening, and she was already fully prepared to strike him with another attack. Hale is fully aware of his current situation. His defenses are compromised. At least, that's what most people would think. Our protagonist is not like most people. He managed to conjure a barrier beneath his feet, creating a solid platform. Many of the spectators were impressed by the use of such a high-level technique. Even the protagonist's rival was shocked since he had turned a magic barrier into a platform, revealing his impressive genius. He is still the same, with a sensitivity to magic and strategy that few possess. To overcome the techniques of the secret moon, our protagonist must use everything he has, and if necessary, he'll bring the sun itself into this battle. A bright light began to shine, so intense it even blinded the blonde girl's eyes. As she tried to better see the source of the light, she began to wonder if it might be sunlight. Our protagonist was properly positioned right in front of her, and the girl knew an attack was coming. To defend herself, she summoned a large magic shield, and our protagonist was already prepared to land a decisive blow on his rival. Wind magic had formed a large sword in his hands, with which he struck the shields summoned by the blonde with great force. Our protagonist continued pressing hard. He was using first circle spells, while his rival used third circle ones. The attack couldn't destroy the barrier, and Adella began to think the boy was being overly cautious. Now he had returned to the ground of the arena, opening up a new opportunity for Adella to land an effective attack. But as soon as she tried to move, she noticed that one of her feet refused to budge. She hadn't realized that her foot had been completely immobilized while she was defending. Noticing that it was a form of earth manipulation, she tried to understand when her opponent had managed to do that. Maybe he had done it at the moment he landed on the arena floor. If that's the case, he relays incredibly fast. The blonde's eyes could barely keep up with what was happening. And while she was distracted by her thoughts, our protagonist had managed to get close to one of her flanks. Now fully ready to maintain his offensive, this time, he would use water magic to attack the girl, who quickly destroyed the spell that had kept her foot stuck to the arena floor. But our protagonist had gained enough time to summon several water spheres, launching all of them toward the girl. Once again, Adella is relying on her magic barrier to stay in the fight. She's being heavily overwhelmed by her rival. Even during the battle, she's impressed by her rival's ability to manage so many elements. She began to recall Kim's words about our protagonist. They used a fourth circle spell, memorization, that made her believe he could only use first circle spells. Full of confidence, she was certain she wouldn't lose to such weak magic. But while lost in thought, something moved quickly through the air. It landed right next to the girl, causing a loud noise. It startled her since she hadn't seen any gaps in her defense. She assumed he had hidden one of his wind techniques, a modified spell, using the sun's excessive brightness to make it happen. Honestly, I didn't understand that attack. It just landed near the blonde, and she's already acting like she got beaten up, for God's sake. Adella fell to the ground, looking up at her victorious opponent. Havel stared firmly at the girl, asking if she had forgotten who she was fighting against. Clenching her fists in fury, Adella looked completely unable to accept the result of the battle. That secretary was impressed by the boy's battle instincts. So as her superior, everything started when he dodged the girl's earth needle. It had all been planned. He unintentionally leaped into the air, encouraging Adella to keep attacking, using the sunlight to blind his opponent. Through memorization, he delayed the release of one of his wind spears. After hitting the ground, it continued to draw the girl's attention, so she wouldn't look back up. He even mobilized her foot so she completely forget about what could come from the sky. When the moment was right, the final wind spear struck its target. A dramatic conclusion, but we know he's also wrong. Even so, he praised the boy's efforts. A great first circle mage, but the protagonist's father remained thoughtful. Because even with those victories, his son was still at the first circle. They turned back to the arena. It seemed the fight wasn't over yet. The two youths were still standing, locked in an intense stare. The protagonist's father was irritated. His son, despite having the upper hand, hadn't finished the fight, so he concluded that the boy must be completely incapable of winning. At least, that's what he believed, because Adella hadn't yet used her greatest trump card. Placing her hand over her chest, she said she was impressed. It reminded her of the old days, and now she would also fight her rival with all the strength she had. And that was exactly what our protagonist had been eagerly waiting for. The blonde's entire body began to shine intensely. That was the supreme attribute of the moon, the secret magic of the House of Mystics, the Yahello. Once she began performing her secret technique, several magic circles started to appear in the sky. The resulting energy was so powerful it began pushing the protagonist's body backward, forcing him to resist just to remain in place. The energy was so immense that it filled the entire sky above the arena, leaving the crowd deeply impressed. Inside the room reserved for important figures, the protagonist's father began sweating cold. He stood up and walked toward the exit. Kim asked if he was really leaving. The old man said the battle was already decided. There was no need to keep watching. But just as he finished those words, both were stunned by what unfolded in the fight. Even the secretary judged it to be completely impossible. While Kim couldn't hide a mix of shock and joy at what he was witnessing, the protagonist's friend was also completely in shock. But none of them were more surprised than Adella herself, because our protagonist had done something truly intriguing. That magic circle on his back, it was the flaming volcano. He had just shown them a second circle spell. He told the girl he had already warned her. He arrived late to the match because he needed to prepare to defeat her. She still believed that memorization was limited to first circle spells. And if he did that, it was possible he had already reached the fifth magic circle. But since that idea was completely unrealistic, our protagonist stayed silent. No one knew the truth yet. The night before, the students were heading to their dorms. Inside his room, Yahello was deeply focused, studying the mysterious book. He knew he wouldn't be able to defeat that girl using only first circle spells, and his fighting style isn't very compatible with the secrets of magic. His original plan was to wait until he matured and only then defeat her. But in the newly written pages of that book, he realized he can handle Simi. He received instructions to channel his magical power into the circle on the next page. The book said it would take him to a new domain. Intrigued by that guidance, he started thinking it could be some kind of mechanism. Since there was no reason to hesitate, he decided to give the unknown a chance, channeling his magical energy into that magic circle. Immediately, the book began to glow, leaving the boy deeply impressed until the glow became so intense that it hurt his eyes. The energy being released was overwhelming. He could no longer look directly at the pages until finally, everything stopped, leaving only the glowing pages of the book. When he was finally able to open his eyes, he realized that many things had changed. He was now in a different environment, filled with shelves and books like a library. Not recognizing the place, Yahello began to wonder where he might be. A woman answered that question, welcoming him to the first page of the first challenge. The girl with the peculiar appearance is named Alpha, and she is the guide assigned to that page. These details were still very confusing to our protagonist. She confirmed that this was the first challenge within the Book of Idrud, but that information only made the boy more confused, realizing that he was inside the book. He hadn't been teleported to a faraway place. He was inside the mysterious book. If that's really true, unbelievable. In that challenge, they would see if the protagonist, Simi, had already been fully refined. He'd receive instructions shortly after the beginning. If he could pass through pages 18 to 31, he would receive information about the second circle. Yahello understood that he needed to overcome this in order to reach the next levels. Since the explanation had already been given, Alpha asked if they could begin. Filled with determination, Yahello was eager to be tested, and now everything was going just as he wanted. The first challenge would begin immediately. A soft golden light began to envelope the girl's entire body. While our protagonist looked on, so very surprised, he couldn't tell what she was. She looked human, but he also couldn't rule out the possibility of her being a magical entity. A voice said it would explain how the challenge worked. Yahello immediately recognized that voice. It was his teacher's. A gem made of light and appeared. It was called the elemental mana light. It was still incomplete but contained 4 irregular mixed attributes. With the stone floating in his hands, Yahello remained visibly stunned. His task was to completely purify the artifact. Faced with this challenge, he briefly began to doubt his capabilities. Because that type of artifact is very delicate, it requires manipulating mana with extreme caution. Inside it, the 4 types of mana existed in a chaotic state, and now he was entrusted with purifying it. It was like separating grains of sand, salt, and sugar after they had been completely mixed together. This was no easy task. Only those who had mastered the intent of the heart could purify it. Even so, refusing to give in to his insecurity, Hale realized that it was going to be a very interesting challenge. He immediately began using the intent of the heart to overcome it. Little by little, the completely mixed mana began to separate. This task demanded every bit of concentration the boy could muster. All this focus was being poured into overcoming it, and he continued separating the tiny particles of mana within the artifact. His task was nearly complete, but the difficulty kept increasing until he was repelled by the artifact crashing into the room's bookshelves. If the mana wavers even slightly, there's a shockwave. He needed to be even more careful. The mana was so entangled that separating them wasn't easy at all. After the first failed attempt, Heol reached an interesting conclusion and now believed he could do it. He would try as many times as necessary, and time began to pass quickly. He kept trying. If he lost focus even a little, he had to start the entire process again, until he finally managed to purify the artifact. His teacher congratulated him for completing the first challenge, calling the boy once again his successor. For mastering the intent of the heart, the book would now be updated with instructions about the second circle. After those words, the protagonist's eyes suddenly opened. He was staring at the ceiling of his room, finally realizing that he had returned to the real world. His book had also gone through a few updates. Heading straight to the source of knowledge, Hale was eager to learn even more about the second circle. He knew the next match was approaching, and before it happened, Hailey was confident he would be able to fully master the second circle. Until finally, the time for the match arrived. Mary determined Adella was using her family's secret technique, unleashing truly terrifying power. She believed that would be more than enough to secure her victory. Our protagonist had been engulfed by a massive pillar of light. His friend watched the fight and became worried, as it was possible that attack had ended the match. Even Adella believed it, turning her back on her opponent as she said the duel was over. But in her thoughts, she acknowledged that her rival had grown much stronger in a short period of time. She began to recall the rivalry between them, believing that the genius she once knew no longer existed. However, she was soon caught by surprise as a strange sound echoed through the arena. She looked back in shock, trying to understand what was happening. That was the second circle. Our protagonist was activating resonance. With blue flames in one hand and red in the other, he was still in the match. And now he would show everyone that there was still great potential in his career. Bringing both hands together, he fused two infinite circles. With free will, they would now become his hands and feet. Both Kim and the protagonist's father watched in total astonishment. They had no words to describe what they were seeing. Even the people in the audience were amazed, and the blonde girl was paralyzed, unable to understand any of it. Our protagonist was executing his techniques, and in addition to the magic circle on his back, 2 extra pairs of hands had appeared. He was now about to unleash the flaming volcano. Adella tried to react quickly to create a magic barrier. However, our protagonist had materialized a massive magic-powered machine gun. That's when the blonde realized she really should have gone to the bathroom before the duel started, because she was fully aware she wouldn't be able to block that attack. Even so, she was still determined to do whatever she could to keep fighting. For the first time in the entire story, her expression changed. Adella was genuinely happy because her rival had returned. Unfortunately, our protagonist didn't see her smile. He pulled the trigger without mercy. Even a referee was impressed by all that power. In an instant, everything he had summoned vanished within the arena. The protagonist's father and Kim still had nothing to say. The poor blonde girl could no longer stand on her feet because she had been completely defeated by our protagonist. Even though he had won, Heol nearly collapsed, completely exhausted. Only then did the referee declare that the match was over, naming Heol the victor. His father began to leave the room again, and the secretary asked if he was really going. The old man said he had other matters to attend to. With a slight smile on his face, Kim seemed to have understood everything. Because that man was definitely not good at one thing, hiding lies. As soon as our protagonist left the arena, he ran into several people. But none of them were his focus right now. His body was completely drained. The second circle of resonance synchronizes with the intention of a heart from the first circle to amplify magic. And moon magic is a hybrid technique. It combines the reach of light magic with the power of darkness. This happens through small adjustments made with the dark element, altering its intensity. That way, he could narrow the attack's range, and he countered the halo with enhanced dark magic. Since moon magic is a secret technique restricted to members of the House of the Moon, not everyone can use it. But by briefly observing that technique, he understood its structure, managing delicate mana manipulation. This was only possible thanks to the resonance circle, purifying that artifact refine his mana control, which was crucial to his victory. While sitting and thinking, he noticed that students were gathering in another place. A man wearing glasses was approaching him. Finally, he had the chance to speak with the protagonist, which left the boy completely surprised because standing before him was the master of the magic tower, and the man said he had come to speak directly with Hale. The two went somewhere else so they could talk more privately. He apologized for disturbing the boy, who must be very tired, but he had watched the duel, saying it had been an excellent battle. Hale thanked him for the compliment. Now the man is going to ask him a direct question based on things he had observed. He wanted to know if the boy had reached the fifth circle. Intimidated by the question, he remained silent for a few moments. And in fact, he had used second circle magic, and that man must be thinking he used the memorization technique. That's why he's probably assuming our protagonist reached the fifth circle because of the limitations of memorization. A bit embarrassed, he tried to explain in saying that he hadn't reached the fifth circle yet. But the man's curiosity was immense. He wanted to know how the boy managed to use that last spell. Hale said the man wouldn't believe him if he found out he used vision magic. Recalling something he'd heard from the boy before, he thought he was referring to transformation magic, something that had already been mentioned in a previous occasion. Hale confirmed that assumption, but in truth, he didn't want to reveal what had really happened, so he adopted that version of the story. If he had truly reached the fifth circle at age 18, it would cause a huge stir in the world. Kim praised the boy's skill, though he still didn't understand how it related to second circle magic. The man asked many questions, but his doubts remained unanswered. Hale told him he had perfected the memorization spell. Those words left Kim deeply impressed. He could no longer hide his excitement, seeing that this was indeed a way of doing things. Realizing it was a remarkable strategy, his posture remained serious as he brought his hand closer to our protagonist, only to congratulate him because the boy had overcome a known weakness on the memorization spell. However, our protagonist was no fool. He noticed that the man's eye color had changed. They were now red. It was as if he was being completely analyzed. The eyes remained fixed on the boy, who started to feel extremely uncomfortable because the man still hadn't removed his hand from the protagonist's shoulder. Until finally, he seemed to calm down because he had confirmed that there were no mana traces corresponding to the fifth circle. Just as the boy's father had said, he hadn't gotten there yet. Summing it up, he said he understood everything and would give an explanation to the reporters, but his eyes remained intrigued with unanswered questions. The boy stood up from the armchair and thanked him, wishing the man a safe trip home. As he exited the room, he had a respectful bow. But that brief interaction had left the boy very nervous. He hadn't expected the master of the magic tower to inspect him with the red jade eyes. It's said that the blue tower's master possesses those eyes. They can pierce the very essence of mana, making them the most powerful ocular detection technique. Our protagonist believes he got away without being exposed since the Blue Tower Master didn't do anything. The techniques of Bait Nio are his greatest asset, and he can't reveal them recklessly. More battles occurred throughout the exam, and our protagonist continued to accumulate victories. None of his opponents have been as challenging as the blonde girl. While walking through the corridors, someone called out for him to wait a moment. Turning around to see who it was, he realized it was Adella. He thought she was still unconscious, but the girl was already on her feet saying she was fine. Hala asked her to skip the introductions. Adella said that if it wasn't a bother, she would like to receive some advice about the match. But since the final round hadn't happened yet, she said he could do it later, so he wouldn't get too tired. But that wasn't a problem for him. He said they could do it now. That would help him grow too, and he asked the blonde to follow him to the waiting room. She acknowledged that she still had much to learn in terms of strategy and magic use, and that one day, she would reach that level too. Because she wanted to be like our protagonist. As the boy walked, he could feel the heat of her gaze. In the middle of the city, there was a tall mirrored building. It looked like the headquarters of some important place. Inside that building was a large residence. And watching our protagonist giving interviews, a girl thought all of this had already ended. The crest at the top of the building was the symbol of the Shin family, and the girl did not look pleased with what she saw on the news. That completely changed her plans since she had believed everything had already been resolved. She asked if her brother was going to leave Hale alone. She is the eldest daughter of the family, Shin, but since her name is too complicated, she'll be called Violetta from now on. Shin Jihan is the name of the man, and he asked what they should do under these circumstances. The girl doesn't want the protagonist to be accepted back into the family, saying her brother also knows how things were a year ago. She doesn't want to go through that kind of treatment again, but her brother told her not to worry. A year ago, the protagonist was still a great prodigy. But currently, he's just trash capable of using second circle spells, and he asked if Violetta hadn't watched the matches too. What truly worries her is the notoriety he's gaining among people, with everyone saying the protagonist is amazing. She hadn't told her to pay close attention to what he was about to say. The opponents the protagonist faced so far were only third circle mages. He likely won't be able to defeat someone from the fourth circle. Besides, he has a catastrophic flaw since he's unable to use I and will almost certainly be unable to remain promising. No matter what he's done, he's far inferior to a fourth circle mage, and so are his skills. Violetta seemed more at ease seeing things that way, imagining that our protagonist would continue crawling on the ground. Even so, she couldn't get rid of all her insecurities, saying he might become a threat to the next head of the family. In that case, Jihan said they could take care of him. There's still time for that. The day was nearly over and twilight light bathed the arena. The floor of the place was heavily damaged, and a boy had collapsed to the ground completely exhausted. That was enough for the referee, who declared the end of the match. And the champion among the second-year students was Shin Hale, who began receiving applause from the audience. Mage began saying the prodigy had finally returned, and that it was expected from someone of his family to do something like that. Even without using AI, he had managed to come out victorious, further increasing his fame as a genius. His friend kept cheering in the crowd, saying our protagonist was truly amazing. Approaching him, he said everyone wouldn't stop talking about the boy's skills. He was being recognized by all. But there were also those who could only feel envy, saying the protagonist was nothing without using forbidden magic. Their teacher was also very proud of the result achieved. Heel's friend asked if the teacher was going to take the students out to celebrate, and that was exactly what he had in mind. Knowing they would be celebrations, they got even more excited, until our protagonist said he would really like to go too, but he had a very important commitment. That immediately ruined his best friend's enthusiasm. He said it wouldn't be a party without the guest of honor, but Heel insisted it was important. As he rushed out, he apologized once again for it. Already in the city, he knew he had to keep that promise until he finally found what he was looking for. Next to a limousine, a man said they had been waiting for him, the youngest son of the Shin family. The head of the family was already expecting him, and the boy would be taken to the main residence. Night fell, and they finally arrived at the protagonist's destination. For a brief moment, he stood in front of that massive gate. It had been a year since the last time he was there, because he had rebelled against his father after being declared incompatible with AI and was forbidden from ever entering that place again. And due to his recent achievements, he had entered there once more. Observing the interior of that room, he realized nothing had changed. Everything was just as he remembered. He took a few more steps into the massive hall and came face to face with a large pair of doors. On the other side of that room was his father's office. Finally, after all his effort, he had made it back to that place. Once in front of the door, he knocked lightly to announce his arrival. And indeed, the head of the family was already waiting for the protagonist to arrive. The old man stared at the door attentively and granted the visitor permission to enter until our protagonist finally opened the door. Once inside the office, the boy showed his respect and said it had been a while since the last time he was there with his father. The old man told him to sit down. As they talk, he said he used to think of the boy as a failure. For God's sake, what pathetic father. Because it took him 20 times longer to cast his spell, and they would disappear if he lost focus, incapable of doing more than one thing at a time. He said his son was the perfect example of how useless a person could be. This guy's definitely winning father of the year, for God's sake. Even so, everyone acknowledged our protagonist's exceptional talent. So he suggested the boy use AI to bring out the full extent of his potential. He didn't have high expectations for it. He saw it as a desperate move. After that free humiliation session, our protagonist said he understood everything. The old man believed that after that newspaper article, his son would come to his senses after being defeated. But things turned out differently. His expectations were completely shattered because the boy had mastered magic transformation, and he had won that bet between them. The protagonist's comeback performance was worthy of a real mage. The boy's eyes began to shine after hearing those words. He genuinely thanked his father since he's a huge attention beggar, and the old man confirmed that from this point on, the family would give him all the support he needed to grow. The boy should say everything necessary to keep developing. You could even live there again. Since he would be the next successor of the whole family, he needed to do a good job. Our protagonist smiled brightly because aside from attention, it would be very convenient to get a fat inheritance. But the old man still had one last warning to give. If he suspects that the boy is stagnating or regressing in his progress, he would personally destroy his magic circles. Frankly, this guy tries really hard to be a bad dad. It would have been better if he had just been absent. Our protagonist felt intimidated by the pressure of an 8th circle mage. This was his last chance. He agreed to his father's absurd condition. Sitting back down in the chair, the old man asked what the boy's goal was. He said that at one point he did wish to become the head of the family, but he's way behind the other siblings who were already dedicated to that mission. Our protagonist said that remains his greatest goal, nothing less than that. He'll make everyone in the family recognize him. The old man wants to know how the boy plans to carry out this plan. So he showed something on the table, saying he would be participating in it, the worldwide academy competition that would take place in 2 months. He said he would return home with the gold medal. This competition is exclusively for students under 20 years old. It happens every year and is known as the Magic Olympics. The competition level is high, comparable to professional leagues. The old man said the country's record was a silver medal, won by the leader of the Blue Tower, something that happened several years ago. Then he said the boy's goal sounds completely delusional. My God. This guy is a master of healthy motivation. But our protagonist wasn't fazed. He said he had one condition for his father. He asked that over the next 2 months, his father prevent his siblings from interfering with him because it would harm his training. The old man not only doubted the boy could win a gold medal, he now realized the kid was asking for immediate protection. Normally, he would reject a request like that, but he admitted it might actually be a good idea. The day finally dawns and several books are scattered across the bedroom floor. Our protagonist fell asleep right there. He couldn't even walk 1.5 meters to sleep in a comfortable bed. Opening his eyes slowly, he realized he had fallen asleep without even noticing. As soon as he returned from his family's house, he started digging into the requirements for the second test. Even though he had overcome the first challenge, he needed to master the 3rd circle, and for that, he had to complete the second test. Unfortunately, he's completely lost. An only clue he has his resonance. Maybe he has to raise his level until it becomes consonance, the full refinement of the 2nd circle. At least that's what he's going to try as he's working to understand the principles of consonance. The clues in the book said he needs the circle of judgment and the circle of resonance to connect organically. Our protagonist began trying to put that into practice. The circles were connected, but in an imperfect way. This is the crossroads he finds himself in. Since his mind was too occupied with it, he decided to go for a walk to clear his thoughts. He decided to head to the city center. Breathing in the fresh air and seeing the buildings around, he immediately felt relieved. Now he believes he's much more capable of reaching full resonance. While he was deep in thought, someone told him to be careful. Looking to the side, an object was approaching his face dangerously fast. But his reflexes didn't react in time, and he was hit by the object. A girl approached, asking if he was okay, and our protagonist complained that it hurt a little. Looking ahead, he seemed to recognize that figure, because it was Adella standing before him now. The two began walking together, and he asked why that plastic bag had flown into his face. She said she had been swinging the bag cheerfully because she was going to drink banana milk, but ended up losing control and it flew off, hitting the boy's face. Finally understanding what had happened, he saw the girl start apologizing. Despite that, he was grateful since he was also going to drink banana milk and asked if she still only drank that. Revealing a bag full of it, the girl said it was the perfect drink. She also said she had heard some rumors that the boy had returned to his family's home. He confirmed that to her, saying he had returned to the magic tower the day before. The blonde said that was a great relief and asked if he still dreamed of becoming the head of the magic tower. A bit confused, our protagonist asked if he had ever said something like that. She recalled the conversations they had when they were kids, saying they talked about that topic a lot. But our protagonist no longer dreams of that sort of thing. Adella was very surprised by those words, wanting to know if he had accepted responsibilities tied to his family's reality. Since he has many siblings, becoming the head wouldn't be an easy task, and Heol found it strange that she was thinking about that so seriously. He said that his current dream is to become the master of magic, to become the pinnacle of the subject above all other magic towers. That is his new goal, which left the guru very impressed, since that is something almost beyond imagination given how difficult it is. And being someone who sees him as a rival, things just became even more challenging. At the main house of our protagonist's family, people are very anxious. Violetta can't stop biting her nails while thinking about all the things that might happen. She slammed her hands on the table to talk to her brother. She asked if he wasn't worried about what had happened, and the boy said the old man must have had his own reasons. But he was also thoughtful because it was hard for him to believe in those conditions. The night before, they had been summoned by the family head for a conversation. Knowing he's an exemplary father, he already understands the personalities of the two degenerates, and he had an order for both of them. For the next 2 months, they were not to interfere with the protagonist's life in any way. Violetta was immediately outraged, but her brother asked her to keep talking. He wanted to know what had motivated their father to do such a thing. The best father in the galaxy said they should already know that the youngest son had returned to the family. He's still in development and is a year behind the others. He claimed that 2 months would be necessary for him to adapt to this exemplary family, and he knows that those two shining examples of morality and human decency in front of him could cause problems. For a brief moment, the boy went silent, showing how angry he was, until he agreed with his father's request, wanting to know if there was anything else. The old man said they must be tired and told them to disappear, because a good son is a distant son. Violetta wanted to know why they left that place without questioning the family head's orders, but she quickly became frightened by what she was feeling. Because her brother couldn't hide the rage he was feeling, accepting that order was very difficult. Min Hyuk and Min Ji are the other siblings who seem to be more rational and aren't invested in this competition, so they weren't summoned. But he can't accept the privilege the youngest son had received. If it were the traditional old man he had known, he would never have granted such a favor. Every child should fend for themselves. That's the old man's motto. So he can't understand why the old man, best father in the galaxy, suddenly started behaving like a father for the first time in his life. Violetta is theorizing a few things, wondering if the old man already knows everything. Her brother said that's not it because the youngest son hasn't shown enough to be a successor yet. Even so, it's possible he demonstrated some interesting potential. Or maybe old man is just interested in mysterious magic the youngest son is capable of using, or perhaps he made a deal. Violetta becomes worried, imagining what kind of deal they could have made. And that might be right because the old man doesn't act that way, and his face seemed desperate. She's already thinking about ordering her lackeys not to follow the youngest brother, but the treacherous brother said that might be a problem. Since his father has followers who operate from the Shadows Intelligence Unit that serves directly under the head of the family, if he finds out anything, it'll be a problem. The treacherous one has already pulled all surveillance off his brother to avoid issues. Violetta wants to know what he plans to do now, so he said he was going to take action. He can't let his brother get that kind of advantage. He needs to consult the Black Tower immediately. Another school day is underway at Obelisk Academy. The teacher says the evaluations are over and congratulates her students, announcing that first place belongs to that class. She asked our protagonist to stand so he could be applauded. Among all 17-year-olds in the country, he was the best of them all. Now that he's in first place, he could hold that position for 2 more months and compete in the Academy Olympics. And that's exactly what our protagonist is planning to do. The jealous ones are quick to say he's too ambitious, because in 2 months, he'll definitely lose the reputation he worked so hard to earn. Even hearing those words, the boy doesn't let himself be shaken. He has the mental resilience of someone who grew up with the best dad in the galaxy. That's why he remains confident. His friend is stretching outside, relieved that class is finally over. He hates going through theoretical lessons, and our protagonist says that tomorrow will be practical training, which is why they should keep exercising since his friend's body is still way too weak. Even hearing that comment, he agrees with the statement. Unfortunately, he can no longer joke around saying the protagonist is weak, and Hale said he should put in some effort to get stronger too. Something the boy is willing to do just so he can beat up his friend. With all that determination, he suggested they head to the training room after dinner. But his friend wasn't thrilled with the idea, and our protagonist asked what was with that confused expression. He said he's out of shape right now, so he'll have to lead it for another time. Hale told him he could have just said no. He didn't have to make up an excuse. His friends said he doesn't like working out with the protagonist, which offended him a bit until the boy revealed that he finds his training a little scary. Even the others' expressions are puzzled. Our protagonist is doing squats with a ridiculous amount of weight. He must have some dirty little secret, maybe a hidden sirens or something. Even with all that weight, our protagonist does multiple reps, leaving everyone impressed. Some recognize him as the one who took first place in the evaluations. After finishing his exercise, he carefully set the weights down. He'd been so focused on improving his magic that he ended up neglecting his physical training, saying he had lost the touch. After hydrating a bit, he started thinking about the notes from the book. The infinite circle is related to the body, and it interacts with physical training. When both are strong, they become more efficient. That's why he also needs to commit to physical training. But carrying all that weight, he must really have a dirty secret. Maybe he's making love to protein shakes. Inside that building, there's a three-eyed beast that looks like a panther. Those Digimonts are part of the protagonist's training. The creatures charge at him, flashing sharp claws and dangerous fangs. But the boy dodges the first attacks with great ease. Everything is crystal clear to his well-trained eyes, taking the opportunity to strike some of the digitized creatures. As they're hit, they begin to vanish. The protagonist's movements are so well crafted that he manages to confuse the creatures, creating chances to obliterate each one of them with his flames. With his final attack, he struck two more, leaving just one Digimon to be incinerated. His training was finally complete. The instructor would now give the boy his results. His performance was absolutely flawless, knowing that our protagonist was thrilled. While sitting on a bench, he started thinking about his situation. Thanks to the infinite circle, his physical abilities have been enhanced by about 1.5 times. Once he reaches the third circle, he'll become even stronger, so he needs to refine the infinite circle. Closing his eyes, he began to concentrate. He needed all his focus. He was trying to perfect the circles he had already mastered, making mana flow through his body, making precise adjustments to the rotation of each circle, gradually increasing the purity of the mana circulating between them. He was close to synchronizing both, but the boy still isn't able to do that, and it's an extremely exhausting task. He had reached 99%, stalled at the final stage before synchronization could be completed. Despite his many failed attempts, he didn't get discouraged at all. After all, if being the son of the best father in the galaxy didn't break him, nothing else would. Still part of his training, he started running outside. Our protagonist was listening to his favorite songs to make the exercise easier until he began approaching a street corner. Just as he was about to turn, he saw a hooded man on the other side. The man tried to hit him in the face with a strike, but our protagonist's reflexes were incredibly sharp, and he managed to dodge it, immediately asking who the person trying to hit him was. No words were needed. He quickly recognized the identity of the man. It was Beck Sakyuk, the one who had just tried to attack him. The man tried to strike again, but his blow didn't land on the protagonist. Pulling off a mask on his face, he said the boy was really good at dodging like a rat. Picking up one of his earbuds that had fallen to the ground, our protagonist asked why he had returned home, saying he didn't return because he couldn't, provoking the boy with that truth. Since he was under evaluation, he wasn't allowed to leave the academy, and Beck was getting even more irritated. Our protagonist said that after Beck used his family's influence, all he managed to do was screw himself even harder, saying that the bastard had nowhere left to go. Summoning fire magic, he had already lost emotional control and said he was going to end the protagonist, who now realized how serious the situation was. That degenerate was about to attack him in the middle of the street using magic. Beck charged forward furiously, determined to destroy the promising future of a spoiled rich kid. His attacks were far too slow for the protagonist, who dodged and grabbed him by the shirt. Beck realized his attack had been completely intercepted, and it didn't take long before he was thrown to the ground like a child. Our protagonist stared down at him firmly while listening to the desperate screams of that pathetic creature. He ended up using it as a great opportunity. The boy was subdued, yet continued to threaten the life of our protagonist. He told the suited man that he had to suppress him since he had been attacked with magic, and all of it had been recorded by the security cameras. Our protagonist said he couldn't believe the audacity of that insolent being, and the man told him to go rest. Everything would be resolved at the academy. Meanwhile, the bastard was being shoved into a car. Looking at him, Heol was hoping the bastard would stay just like that. Finally, morning came at Obelisk Academy. Several students were reading a bulletin that had been published that same day. Beck had been harshly penalized for using offensive magic in the middle of the street. Even so, he only lost 10 points when in reality he should have been expelled. Our protagonist had already expected an outcome like that since the bastard's family is really wealthy and they make large donations to the academy. Maybe Beck is being punished now, but all the boy received was a phone call from someone clearly furious about his actions. The bastard began apologizing to his father, who had already warned him to stay quiet until he graduated, and began asking him if that was really such a difficult task to fulfill. His graduation is necessary for them to receive a noble title, so the boy has to cooperate. Ending the call, he said he would keep that in mind. But the truth is that the boy is still very stressed about the situation. He hated being outdone by the protagonist, who defeated him in a humiliating fashion. He can no longer contain the hatred he feels in his chest. Little by little, that feeling is turning into a very strange obsession since the spoiled brat believes everything is the protagonist's fault. As he crushes his phone underfoot, he keeps telling himself it's Hyeol's fault. One of the teachers approached the boy, noticing that he holds a strong grudge against the protagonist. The spoiled boy wanted to know what the instructor was doing there, saying he decides for himself who he likes or not. The instructor acknowledged that everyone has the right to make that decision in life. Getting even closer to the spoiled one, he asked that he didn't want to get revenge on the protagonist. His first reaction was one of great surprise. But the old man wanted to know, wasn't that exactly the kind of thing he was longing for? Meanwhile, our protagonist continued to be a diligent student doing his studies. He was considering questioning the academy's stance on the incident he went through, ended up gaining something in return. At that exact moment, he had just received an email. It was from his father. The negotiation with the Beck family had ended. Because of the incident, they gained 3% of the mining rights that Beck family holds over a mine. The head of the family wants to know if our protagonist would like to receive some sort of reward for this. To receive a noble title, the Beck family also needs to maintain good relations with others. And the concession they made was the right one. After all, they messed with the most important person in this story, the protagonist. This only emphasizes how important the noble title is to that family. The title separates the families. Stakeyuf ended up being expelled from his because of the actions he took. Thinking that everything was now resolved, our protagonist decided he would refine his techniques a bit more. The next day, life goes on normally at the academy. Hale is thinking that the instructor's control over the students has gotten stricter because of the incident, and one of the instructors came to speak with him directly. This is the same person who's favoring the spoiled brat. So he approached our protagonist in a friendly manner while watching him with treacherous eyes without the boy suspecting a thing. He said he had noticed it. Seems like Hale doesn't like him. Our protagonist was caught off guard and almost admitted that he really didn't. The instructor said that it's understandable since he had been hard on him several times, but his words were sincere advice and asked not to be misunderstood. That was so bizarre that Hyeol started wondering what might be going on that he still doesn't know. The instructor extended his hand asking to start over. Still a little embarrassed, he was about to thank him. But before touching his hand, he felt something dreadful. An uncomfortable sensation was running through his entire body. All of this while the instructor was still congratulating our protagonist on his performance in the competition. Hale noticed that the man has seemed completely calm, but something was very wrong. Now he could see what was surrounding that instructor, a sinister aura. Not knowing exactly what it could be, he thought it might be dark power. The Black Tower is a well-known place in this world. Unlike the other towers, it's unofficial and follows a different path. It's made up of criminals who serve the Dark Mage. Our protagonist never imagined that this instructor could be affiliated with them in any way. It's possible other infiltrated mages are inside the academy too. But that's not his priority right now. First, he needs to understand the formula of that magic to be better positioned in this situation. He immediately used his ability to analyze the phenomenon. That magic felt somewhat familiar. He realized it was a mind control spell. But our protagonist already knows that his brain is completely immune to external interference. So this mind control spell certainly won't work on his brain. Thanks to his innate ability, he'll be able to survive this challenge. People around him still haven't noticed anything, which made him think about his next move. He's going to pretend to be affected by the spell in order to extract as much information about the Black Tower as he can. Our protagonist opened his eyes with an apathetic look. The instructor believed his technique had worked perfectly, saying the boy was a cripple who couldn't use eye, yet would still make an excellent pawn. Leaning toward the boy's ear, he asked him to listen carefully to these instructions. He should carry that object from now on without questioning the reason behind it. Pretending to be under his control, he said he would do as told. But the instructor had one more question. He wanted to understand how the boy's unique magic worked. Pretending to feel a sharp discomfort in his head, the boy said he couldn't answer that. The instructor interpreted that reaction as the subconscious mind's desire to keep things hidden. He told him not to try answering, prompting the boy to behave normally again. Mind control magic has a very specific function. It interferes with the target's emotions to control them effectively. It's a technique used by the Black Tower. When used by an advanced caster, it can destroy the target's mind, making it a dangerous and forbidden spell. Extracting memories from a mind with strong willpower can be fatal. Since the instructor gave up on the question, our protagonist realized his goal must be something else. Even so, the man revealed that he was upset. He wanted to exploit that privileged information, but he couldn't let his mission fail. He said that once it was done, he would remove the vision magic from that boy, and after saying that, he placed his fingers. Our protagonist pretended to have regained consciousness, and the instructor began speaking to him. He asked if everything was all right since the boy had seemed off during the conversation. Could be due to exhaustion. They quickly said their goodbyes, with the instructor advising that a boy should get some rest. It didn't take long for the instructor to vanish into the crowd, but our protagonist is more determined than ever to reach the truth. He continued on his path while his classmates headed to the cafeteria. Haydal sat on one of the benches in the academy garden to examine what he had received. He observed that small chip very carefully. It was an illegally distributed AI. Someone must be trying to frame him as an illegal user. Their goal is to destroy the boy's public reputation, but that instructor has no real motive to ruin him, even if their relationship isn't the best. So someone must have made a request to the Black Tower. Even with this information, he still can't fully analyze the situation. Maybe it was the work of the spoiled brat, but he's already so screwed, it might be unlikely. It could be that one of his siblings is behind it, trying to eliminate him from the succession race. Minji isn't part of that race, so she lacks any real motivation. Inhuk wants to be the family head, but he's never seemed like the type to do something like this. That leaves the two degenerates, who might be working together to sabotage the protagonist. The boy immediately thought about capturing the instructor, interrogating him gently, but that would attract the attention of the Black Tower, which definitely wouldn't be good for his current situation. Faced with all the possibilities, he needs to keep thinking about how to protect himself. To get a few more answers, he went to Earth's Blue Magic Tower, heading to the office of the one who leads it. He was immediately received upon arrival. Kim wanted to know what had brought such a talented young man to his office, and his gaze showed both interest and caution in that interaction. Hale noticed that Master Kim seemed much colder than usual. Even so, this was the chance he had to ask for help. Kim told the boy not to behave as if he were a burden in front of him, and our protagonist knew he had to take advantage of this opportunity. And apparently, just like the rumors say, he must be deeply involved in some research. That's likely why he's acting this way. That's the very question our boy asked, and Kim replied that he was studying either a magical or ordinary stone. And it was taking up more of his time than he had planned. Looking at the artifact, our protagonist instantly recognized it. This was a rare opportunity, and he had to take full advantage of it. Once they sat on the sofa, Kim asked him to get straight to the point since he was busy, not hiding his own curiosity about what had brought the boy there to discuss something in person. Seeing that he was becoming a little hysterical, our protagonist started to worry that he might ignore everything he was about to see. And before getting to the main topic, he said he had something to tell him about the artifact he was researching, that peculiar stone, the elemental crystal. Kinnam was immediately surprised to hear that coming from the boy, and now he wanted to know how he knew about it, since its name hadn't been revealed to anyone. From this point on, the boy had to speak very carefully. Kim was furious, thinking the information might have leaked somehow, and the boy said he hadn't done any such thing. Opening his backpack, he said there was a very simple reason why he knew what it was, because he also had an artifact just like that one, which left Kim even more impressed. Because the version the boy had was already perfectly purified. Kim couldn't dodge the question. He wanted to know if the boy was the one who had done it. Our protagonist confirmed that he had purified the artifact himself. The leader of the Blue Tower, upon hearing that, became very uneasy. No matter how talented the boy was, it should have been impossible. The greatest craftsman in that world, even the master of the Blue Tower himself, couldn't produce an artifact like that. And now a simple student was standing before him claiming he had done it alone. Kim wanted to gather more information, so he asked if the boy had brought the artifact with him. Yahello said he brought it because he knew only a magic tower would have something similar. Kim was very interested in knowing how the boy had obtained such an artifact, but our protagonist didn't give the full answer. He said it was pure chance and luck. The man approached him in a much more friendly manner, saying the boy must be blessed with extraordinary luck, because he recognizes that mages must have their own secrets as part of who they are. So he wouldn't pressure the boy for any additional information. But he was very interested in examining that artifact a bit more closely, something our protagonist allowed. Looking at it more carefully, he said it was the only one of its kind to possess all 4 elements simultaneously. Returning the item to the boy, he asked what the purpose was in bringing it. Our protagonist said he hoped he could use that item to craft another artifact. Intrigued by the request, he wanted to know what Kanye was talking about. Could it be clothes or accessories? Maybe even a weapon? For Yahello, it could be anything that increases the efficiency of elemental magic. Kim understood the request and began to think about it. To create something like that, you need extremely high-quality materials. The cost would be very high, so he asked if the boy could afford it, until he remembered the boy came from a wealthy family and that they'd probably cover all the expenses, but our protagonist said that would be unacceptable. He wants the project to remain completely secret from his family and from anyone else in this land. Revealing the cost of his work, Kim wanted to know how a boy planned to pay that amount and whether he'd be able to afford it without family support. Yahello said he had something else in mind, an alternative method of payment. He would craft a stone like that one right in front of the Tower Master. Kim asked if the boy was seriously saying he'd teach him the method to create that rare item. Because if that was the proposal, it was very interesting. He might even throw in something extra given how big that payment would be, which made Yahello ask if he could also request something else. Now much more friendly, Kim was willing to listen to what kind of request that might be. With a small object in hand, he brought it closer to the master of the magic tower, who immediately recognized the chip as illegal, asking at once how the boy had gotten it. For a brief moment, he was very hesitant. He said that a mage from the Black Tower, infiltrated in the academy, had given it to him. Faced with the presence of these infiltrated mages, he went to the Blue Tower to ask him for help. The full moon shines in the night sky. Our protagonist had received a ride back home. He told the driver to get back safely. Without saying goodbye, the secretary informed him that they would be meeting again very soon. As she drove away, the boy watched her vanish into the horizon. After a very intense day, he finally managed to lie down in his bed to rest. His luck that day had been exceptional. He hadn't imagined that Kim was researching that item. Thanks to that, he could continue keeping the secret from his father to make this new artifact. His plan had been to obtain the mining rights from the back family, but now he has to wait a bit longer. His eyes are extremely tired, and the kiss of Morpheus draws near. At the Blue Tower, Kim remains deep in thought because he knows that security at Obelisk Academy is very efficient. Even so, dark mages managed to infiltrate that place. The only evidence he received of that accusation was the chip and the word of a single student. Even though it was a serious accusation, there wasn't enough material to validate the hypothesis. Normally, he wouldn't take action based on the suspicion of just one student, but things are different with the protagonist, and he decided to take the risk. While on the phone, someone asked if he arrived safely. He confirmed yes and said they should proceed with the plan. Our protagonist continues on his path patiently. They told him not to worry about anything as long as the information is accurate. The magic tower doesn't make mistakes. Inside the elevator, Yahello said he was placing his trust in them and that he would be in touch soon. The young man is now in another hall, and he announced his arrival to those waiting for him. Seated at the table are all his siblings, who grew up in that wonderful home full of warmth and understanding, without a trace of rivalry. Mage reacted very warmly, saying it had been a long time since the last time. He agreed with her words, saying his sister hadn't changed at all. She took that as a compliment, saying her little brother had grown up a lot and would soon be taller than In-hyuk. That brother was also being very friendly, telling her not to say such ominous things about his height. He welcomed the protagonist, acknowledging that it was hard to feel completely happy, but welcomed him nonetheless. The boy thanked him, thinking to himself that his older brother still gets straight to the point just like always. Minji quickly scolded that behavior, but the boy had no idea what he might have done wrong. Only two were left to speak to, those with hearts full of love, Jihan and Violetta, who often conspire against the protagonist. Jihan said he was looking less and less like a child and already resembled a man. Violetta also told him it had been a long time since they last met. While they smiled outside, he was sure his siblings were conspiring against him, which made him think the culprit had to be in that room. The oldest told him to sit down and start eating, saying he was curious to know what motivated the youngest to gather them all, because he was certain it wasn't.
Alright, that's the end of the story. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.